afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Moving Markets Podcast. It is Wednesday, the 13th of March, 2024. We're recording this right at the close of the market. Maybe another short podcast. The markets were a little bit blasé today, but I am going to give you some thoughts that I have specifically on NVIDIA, AMD, and a company that not as much of a household name, but Palantir. I get a lot of questions about these companies, sometimes in different contexts, although AMD and NVIDIA are kind of in the same context. So today's podcast is going to focus a little bit on that. And then we'll just talk about kind of what we expect. It's going to be a repeat of some stuff you've already heard, but kind of what I expect is going to happen when we get the PPI numbers out tomorrow morning. So not going to be a super lengthy podcast, but stay tuned in through the entirety of it, because we're gonna give you some actual insight into what we are going to do with some trades in the very near future. For those of you that want to follow along and see how well we do, enjoy the podcast, but make sure you take some time, if you haven't already, to check us out at sostrades.com. That's sostrades.com, and see what we have to offer. We're now over 37% on the calendar year, and we still have 2 full weeks of trading to go just in the month of March. We're absolutely killing it, folks. The market averages are not, the index averages are not even coming close to what we are already doing as far as a return on our portfolio. You got to get involved and follow these trades. It is so worth the money you spend for one of our education packages, so that you're able to follow these trades in real time with us. I hope you take a minute to look at that, but whether you do or don't, enjoy today's podcast. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Moving Markets Podcast. I am Jeffrey Dunyan, CEO and founder of Safe Option Strategies. Today is Wednesday, March the 13th, 2024. The U.S. stock market has just closed within the last 8 or 10 minutes as we are recording this today. I'm going to offer up a little bit of commentary on the actual market movement today. I'm going to talk a little bit about one new trade that we entered into at Safe Option Strategies. And then I'm going to use that as a segue to give a little bit of my thoughts on 3 different companies. I get asked questions about these companies on a fairly regular basis by Safe Option Strategies members, and occasionally by people who are not members, but they listen to this podcast and they email us or message us in something. And so I'm going to talk about them a little bit, give you my take on them, and then we'll talk a little bit about tomorrow and Friday. I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time talking about the next couple of days, because I've given you my prediction on what I think is likely to happen when that PPI report comes out tomorrow morning and how that's going to affect things. Before we dive into any of that, let's just a quick recap. Dow Jones Industrial Average up 37 points today. That's 0.1%, pretty flat. NASDAQ down almost 10 points. That's about 0.2%. I would also call that relatively flat. The NASDAQ sold off a little bit today, but not horrifically, about 0.5% down 87.87 points. And I don't see that as a really big deal. NVIDIA got blamed for a lot of the sell-off today, but don't forget the huge day that they had yesterday, the sell-off that they had on Monday. They've been under a little bit of pressure, but not anything that I am worried about in any way, shape, or form. The trade I want to tell you about this morning on Discord for Safe Option Strategies members, we did an in-the-money bull call spread and set up a 170 long call, 175 short call, got into the trade for $3, and I'm trying to remember suddenly what I got filled at, right around $3.80 a share, I believe. I'm forgetting my exact fill price, but it was right in there somewhere. And we used the 4/12 expiration for these options. So we're just barely 1 month out. And the idea is that even if AMD were to do anything other than bounce off this 20-day moving average, which is what I believe they're going to do, I think you're going to see them rebound tomorrow and Friday. Or if there's a really bad PPI report tomorrow morning and the whole market sells off tomorrow and Friday, I think they might test the next level of support, which is going to be down around 180. And our trade with the 170 short, 175 long puts us in a really good position to profit on this trade, even in some downward trend. And I apologize, I was filled at 395. Sorry, 395 is where I got filled. We used a limit order of $4.10. And that was this morning when the mid price was bouncing all over the place. So hopefully you got into that trade, and there's about 20% possible return, maybe 23% possible return. I'm actually going after 20% on this one. I don't think it's greedy in any way, shape, or form to go after a 20% return on this trade, because all AMD has to do is stay at or above 75. And even with a little bit of sell-off, I believe they will do that, and I believe they will do it pretty easily. I'm more expecting a rebound within the next couple of days and another leg to the upside, maybe a quick push back up to 200 and maybe even 205 or 210, where they very recently have been. So that is a new trade that we sent out to all of our Safe Option Strategy members this morning. Now, I want to use that AMD news as a segue into talking about NVIDIA, AMD, and Palantir. And let me start out with AMD. Actually, let me start out with NVIDIA, even though we were just talking about AMD. Let me start out with NVIDIA, and then we'll talk about, go back to AMD and talk about that a little bit, and then I'll talk to you about Palantir. I get asked questions about these stocks a lot of times for a couple of reasons. Number one, I do a lot of trading around NVIDIA. I do a lot of non-directional stuff, and I do a lot of in-the-money bull calls on NVIDIA. Just in the last week, you had the one big drop on NVIDIA last week on Friday, followed up by a little bit of a drop on Monday, a big run back up yesterday. And in spite of the fact that NVIDIA was down quite a bit farther today, they actually finished up near their high of the session, and it really wasn't that bad a sell-off. We're talking about 1.12%. Now, if you had a lot of days in a row where you had that kind of a percentage drop, that can add up quickly, no question about it. But folks, this is still a really, really strong company. A lot of people are concerned about missing this massive run up. I mean, nearly 100% in just 2 months. And NVIDIA was a darling of the market last year, the year before. I believe this is going to continue. I'm not suggesting they couldn't have a little bit of a sell-off and maybe come down and test some support around 800, maybe even down at 850, or excuse me, 750 or 725. I don't expect that to happen, but I'm not going to suggest that it couldn't happen. I'm not worried about a little bit of a pullback and a little bit of profit taking and something that may even bring NVIDIA down to 750 or below. People are so afraid right now of missing out on this next 100% that NVIDIA may very well get in the next year or two, that every time this stock dips a little bit, you see people rushing the door to get in. They're buying the dip on this like crazy, and I just don't believe that this run that they're having is over yet. I think it could flatten a little bit. I think it could pull back a little bit. But I think by the time we're into June or July, if it hasn't gone for 8 or 9 or 10 for one split, I think you're going to see this company trading at $1,200 to $1,500 a share before we get past the middle of this year. And I would not be surprised if NVIDIA got to $1,800 a share before the end of this calendar year, unless there is that big split. And then I think from a percentage standpoint, they're still going to go up that far. Don't let the recent talk about the big AI bubble scare you. This is a little bit different than the .com thing that happened back in the late 90s. Back in the late 90s, I was just getting into trading, did a little bit of day trading. I'm one of those people that got burned when we had a recession, when that bubble popped in 2000. I lost a lot of what I had earned prior to that in the few years that I had been trading the markets as an early investor and early trader. This doesn't feel the same to me. Some people are trying to compare it where back in the late 90s, it seemed like any name that you could license and throw .com behind a business name, get a website, throw .com behind it, seemed like all those companies were making money. And then come to find out that a lot of them were not worth anything beyond the name, and they sold off, and the bubble burst, and we had a recession in 2000 as a result of that. The reason I don't believe this is the same is because AI is is a game changer that everybody wants to use, but I don't think our memories are so short as to forget what happened in the late 90s. And I just don't see it being the same thing. I think AI is going to continue to build. And remember that the dot-com bubble grew and grew and grew from about 94, 95, all the way to 1999 and right into the earliest part of 2000. We're at the beginning of AI. So even if this was a similar bubble, it's only been in the past year that AI has become such a buzzword and such a buzz phrase that people have started to see the growth that comes with any affiliation you have as a company with artificial intelligence. I think even if you got something similar to a repeat of the late 90s, you've got 2 to 3 more years before that bubble gets big enough to burst. But again, I personally, I don't feel like it's the same thing. So I think NVIDIA is a place to have money if you can afford shares or if you can afford some type of an option trade. Now, let me shift gears for a minute to AMD and go actually, kind of come back to AMD that we were talking about, the trade that we recently did. Make no mistake about it, AMD is living off of more than just the table scraps from NVIDIA. This is a great chip manufacturer. They are in the same race. Competition is a good thing. And right now, even at $195 a share, they finished today at $194.76. Even at $195 a share, this is still a much more affordable company than NVIDIA. And for people that cannot afford to get into NVIDIA, this, I believe, is the next best alternative. Now, I put Micron as a very close third to AMD, but it's for all the same reasons that AMD is a great company to, or excuse me, all the same reasons that NVIDIA is a great company to be in. So is AMD. And again, it's simply easier to own shares of it. Now, in spite of the fact that it's a $200 a share company or close to it, we at Safe Option Strategies are going to initiate for all the members of our program a collar trade on AMD beginning in the next day or two. I'm going to see if there's one more, maybe 2 more days of pullback based on the PPI numbers coming out tomorrow before I jump in. But before this weekend is over, we're going to be in a new AMD position that if you're a member of Safe Option Strategies, you can follow along in. And so, again, I don't think this is just table scraps. I believe they are a competitor. They're not ahead in the race right now, but you can't count them out either. They're right on, they're riding on the coattails maybe a little bit, but I look at that as a difference than picking up the scraps. I think they're right in the hunt with NVIDIA and are going to continue to be, because that demand for higher power computing chips that can handle very complex AI programs. So watch for AMD to continue to grow, maybe not quite at the same rate as NVIDIA, but look, in only 1 month longer than what it took NVIDIA to nearly double, AMD has doubled. They've gone from $100 a share up to briefly being over $200 a share. They've had, in a 4-month run, they have had a 100% return or growth on this company. So it's a great company to be invested in. Now I'm going to shift gears again and go to a company that has less to do with AI, although I'm sure they're incorporating and using it. I'm going to go to Palantir. Palantir had a really, really nice jump up on their earnings. Went from a $17 a share company, jumped up, just absolutely catapulted up to $24. And even though it's been a little bit bumpy, they've had some pullbacks and it's been a little bit rocky, they have continued to move up. Look at the 20-day moving average and what a steady incline that 20-day moving average is on. Palantir as a company deals with counterterrorism and basically counterterrorism investigating software. They make it easier for policing organizations, for military, for the FBI, for the CIA to do more in its proactive engagement and tackling terrorism. I mean, that's basically what they're doing. And as sad as it is, I don't believe for one second that we're going to see less of a need for this company. I think we're going to see more of a need. I don't like the reasons why, but I think they're going to be a continue. Uh, I think they're going to continue to grow, and I think it's a very good, affordable stock right now. This is a company that sadly, because of the way the world is changing and the continued threat of terrorist activities, this is a company that I believe by the end of this year will double. And by the end of next year, I think this could be over a $100 per share company if they don't do a stock split. And then again, percentage wise, I think it could be just the same thing. Easy company to collar trade. They have some ups and downs. They're decent movers from a percentage standpoint. I own some shares of this right now. Full disclosure, I am in option trades on both AMD and NVIDIA, and I own shares of Palantir. So I want to make full disclosure that I have a vested interest in these companies, but I'm not trying to convince a whole bunch of people to invest in it for the sake of me making more money. I believe in these companies, and that's why I'm invested in them, and that's why I'm speaking this highly of them. I think these are three companies. If you can afford NVIDIA or afford option trades on NVIDIA, I would go there. If not, I would quickly go to AMD as the second choice out of an affordability situation. And Palantir, I think, is going to be a phenomenal company going into the future. And one thing I love about Palantir is this. I hope you recognize and know some of these names. This is in my opinion, a phenomenal management team right here. I know some of these names. I know some of the other things they've been involved in, and I'm telling you right now, this is a well-run company. It's an innovator in an industry that doesn't have a whole lot of players in it, and it's going to be a vitally important company going forward. So I'm big on this company, and this is also one that for Safe Option Strategies members, especially because of how affordable it is, we are going to initiate coverage as a new collar trade company for Palantir. Just like with AMD, I'm going to wait for tomorrow, see what happens with the PPI numbers and what kind of an effect that might have on trading into Thursday and Friday. And then no later than the first part of next week, we're going to be looking at an entry point for a new collar trade on Palantir. So if you're not a member of Safe Option Strategies, you want to follow along. We have a huge amount of success trading these companies, and it's something you can be a part of. Check out sostrades.com if you want to consider becoming a member. I'm just going to mention this very briefly. We've talked enough about it in previous episodes this week. PPI numbers come out tomorrow morning. I am of the opinion that these numbers are going to be higher than what these expectations are. I was right on my call on that on CPI numbers, but I think these are going to be month over month numbers that are going to be up from this, not just the year over year numbers. I think CPI, I think oil prices are up a little bit. Gas prices continue to tick up. They're not skyrocketing real fast, but they continue to tick up. And I think you're going to see more of that through the summer. And I think tomorrow's PPI numbers are going to be a little bit of a precursor of more inflation on the way. I don't think we're going to get a huge spike in inflation, but I think you're going to see those numbers tick back up a little bit over the next couple of months. And I think it's going to be not a great thing for the economy. So keep a close eye on it. But I've said enough about it earlier podcast episodes this week that's as much as I'm going to say about it. Everybody have a great rest of your day. We'll see you back here tomorrow morning when we can talk about whether or not PPI reports caused the market to react in an opposite way of what I think they should have, like yesterday's CPI numbers. We'll see if PPI numbers do the same thing. In the meantime, have a great day. Thanks.